Hello and welcome to our review of the Bajaj Freedom 125, the world's first ground-up CNG bike. Now I know this is a bit unconventional for our reviews. It's more of an analysis, review analysis if you will, because there is a lot to speak about this bike. So let's just jump right into it.
So straight off the bat, once you get us ride this motorcycle and start riding it, the first thing I really appreciated was the refinement levels of this motor. It's an extremely refined motor. The clutch action is light, the gear shifts are slick. Now in fifth gear, up to 80 kilometers per hour, it's really smooth. Only after that, you will feel a few vibrations, but they're nothing that really ruin the ride experience. And the target audience who's going to use this motorcycle isn't really going to care about those speeds.
So in the past 2 days, we rode the bike around 270-280 kilometers between Azaman and me. And Azaman did the testing on the V-Box. So how did it compare to other 125s in terms of performance?
Now yeah, while this is a 125cc motor, the performance is more on par with 110cc motorcycles. So I would say it's very close to something like the TVS Radeon, which is one of the best bikes in the segment. So up to 60 kilometers per hour, they do have a very similar acceleration time.
But of course, that is in petrol mode. And when I was riding, I did find a difference between petrol and CNG. Does the V-Box say the same?
Of course, there's a very noticeable, clear difference between the petrol and CNG mode. In the sprint up to 80, the difference is around 3 seconds.
Of course, that's because of the two different fuels. CNG is a dry fuel that is less power dense. Petrol is a wet fuel which has more power density. So of course, there will be a difference in performance. But what I really appreciated was that even in CNG mode, this motor is super tractable. Like even at 25 kph in fifth gear, open the gas and the bike just moves forward very smoothly. Of course, it will not jump forward with gusto, but it will not bog down, it will not judder at all.
So yeah, overall, it's a very refined and a very tractable motor. The only time that you're really going to need to make gear shifts is when you're climbing a really steep slope or you're trying to make quick overtakes in the city.
But now coming to the question that's on everybody's mind. What is the efficiency? Now for Azaman did the testing for efficiency and he filled the tank up, the CNG tank up twice. So how was that like?
Okay, so my first experience filling up CNG, because I've never ever filled up a CNG car before. So I first checked on maps where the closest CNG pump was, and I made my way there. It was around 4 kilometers away. After heading there, I was greeted with the sight of a bunch of vehicles waiting in line to get their CNG tanks filled. There were almost 30 cabs and rickshaws combined. Now, I obviously got to break the line because there's so much hype and interest in this product of late. Everybody wants to see it, everybody wants to know about it. Now, even after getting to the front of the line, I realized that everyone was actually waiting because there was just no CNG at the pump. So we had to wait another 15-20 minutes, wait for the truck to arrive. After that, it refilled the CNG pump and then we got it filled. But there's a catch. Now, while I had drained the CNG tank completely and gone to fill it, the attendant filled it up, but it only filled 1.63 kg compared to the 2 kg that Bajaj claims.
Now, of course, that's no shade on Bajaj because to fill the full 2 kilos in the tank, you need 200 bar of pressure from the pump. And Bajaj said that even if you have a pressure of 160 bar at the pump, you should be able to fill 1.8 kilos in the tank. So clearly, this pump had a lot less pressure. But then, Azaman, how much did we go in that tank?
Okay, so in that 1.63 kgs of tank pressure that we filled, we were able to travel almost 140 kilometers. So that makes it around 85 kilometers per kg of CNG.
And then petrol?
Okay, and in petrol, you're able to get around 55 to 56 kilometers per liter. But this only has a very small 2-liter tank. Now, essentially, that's like the reserve tank of some motorcycles. So don't expect this to, give you too much. The only thing that I would have really appreciated was maybe if the tank was slightly larger or if there was a gauge for petrol as well.
Yeah, because when I took the bike out of Bajaj and I started riding and I switched to petrol mode, the low fuel light came on and I was like, okay, I have to fill up immediately. I went to the petrol pump and opened the tank and the tank was full already. So basically that light just indicates that you're in petrol and not on reserve. And when it goes on reserve, that light will start to flash. Same with the CNG, once the tank is low on pressure, it will start to flash at you, the CNG light, so you know you have to fill up. And of course, to switch between the two, CNG and petrol, the switch on the left hand side handlebar, you can switch on the fly. And sometimes the bike will actually switch to petrol from CNG by itself. Now that's because it has two different systems for petrol and CNG, two different injectors. And to ensure that the petrol injector stays clean, the fuel pump stays working fine, it will switch every once in a while. So again, first time it happened to me, I was in CNG mode, the bike went to petrol and refused to come out of CNG mode even if I flicked the switch up and down multiple times. So I was freaking out, but after 2-3 minutes of riding in petrol, it went back to CNG by itself. So that was just fine.
Okay, so now coming to a very important aspect is the ride quality and handling of this motorcycle. Now the suspension setup is quite plush on our roads. It's really nice, but the front end does feel like it's a bit too soft. So if you're going to hit potholes really hard, you're going to feel like it's bottoming out too quickly. And to add to it, it does look like this has upside down forks, but these are telescopic forks with these covers, and these covers do tend to rattle around when you're hitting potholes really hard.
Now, of course, that rear there is a link monoshock, something you see on sports bikes of the Yamaha R15 or even the Royal Enfield Himalayan. But of course, I found the rear a little bit on the stiffer side. With the pillion, it just becomes super plush and it rides just beautifully.
And another thing to address is that now this is a 125cc motorcycle, and on paper it has a curb weight of around 147 kilograms. Now that might sound like it's heavy, but once it's on the go, this motorcycle is extremely easy to maneuver.
And that's because this bike has a pretty high center of gravity thanks to the CNG tank under the seat. Now the full tank, that's 18 kilos right under your bum, and that does make it quite easy to maneuver because your CG is so much higher up.
Yeah, and then when we come to another important segment, that's braking of this motorcycle. Now the braking feel is decent when you're going to be really braking slowly. Although if you are trying to get on the brakes in case of an emergency, getting on the front brake tends to lock up the front tire, it skids and it doesn't feel so stable. What can be done to minimize this problem is getting on the rear brake and the front brake together.
You have CBS there as well. But these tires, these are not MRS like always, right?
Yeah, so that's surprising. Bajaj always gives MRF tires, but this time they have gone with TVS Eurogrip rubber. Now that's because the rear is a 16-inch wheel and MRF doesn't really make 16-inch tires yet.
Now a 16-inch wheel at the back is quite odd for this segment, but that's not a choice for handling and doesn't affect the bike in any negative way. Effectively, it's there for packaging because you have that CNG cylinder under the tank. You need more room for the rear wheel to move up and down to give it enough travel. That's why they work for a smaller rear wheel, so that to ensure that the bike rides well on pretty much any road.
One of the main reasons that this Bajaj CNG motorcycle is getting so much attention is because of that styling. I mean, it looks exactly like a supermoto motorcycle, and that's especially because of this tall seat.
Yeah, that tall flat seat, well, it is a bit tall in terms of height. It's 825 mm. I think that's the highest in segment. Now, of course, for my height of 5'9", I had no issues getting my feet on the ground. Even Azaman, who's 5'7", he had no problems. But again, Azaman is used to riding tall bikes pretty much all the time. But if you are on the shorter side, you will find the seat a little tall, and it's something you have to get used to.
And what I do really like about this CNG motorcycle is that even though it has that tank inside, it has a very compact design. And another segment first is that steel trellis frame.
Now, that's not only an aesthetic choice, it's also for safety, because between the trellis frame you have the CNG tank, and the question on everyone's mind is how safe is this bike? Is it like sitting on a bomb? Now, of course, we can't vouch for that at all, but Bajaj showed us some tests that they ran. They ran 11 tests for safety. They dropped the bike from a height, they did a front impact of 60 kph against a 1.5 ton vehicle. They ran a 10-ton truck over the bike, and the CNG tank didn't deform one bit, and even the pressure valve maintained its pressure the whole time. So at least in theory, it should be as safe as it gets.
Yeah, so overall, with the quality of plastics, just this overall new design language, fresh design language, it is really good for the price that it's being offered at.
Okay, so Azaman, we have spoken about most things, but what about features?
Okay, so in terms of features, it is a simple motorcycle, but it does get some stuff as well. Now, for starters, you get this LCD dash that's pretty easy to read, information is well laid out, and as I said earlier, the only thing I could have wished for is if it got a fuel gauge for the petrol mode as well. Another thing that I'd really like to address is something that Bajaj did not tell us at all during the launch or the presentation of this motorcycle. This gets an adjustable dash. So now you have this thumb screw on the left hand side, which you can just quickly remove and adjust it between two settings. If this motorcycle is being ridden by separate riders, this does become a really helpful feature.
Having the dash tilted towards you or away from you can really help.
Okay, so apart from this, it also gets the basic Bluetooth connectivity feature and option, which you can connect to your phone, and it also gets a button on the left hand side to quickly answer calls. Although unfortunately, we couldn't get a Bajaj Connect app to connect to this motorcycle, but we have used it in the past and it does work fairly well.
Now, of course, if you want a bike with more features, the Freedom is quite basic. The top-end TVS Raider, which is cheaper than top-end Freedom, offers you a Tier 2 dash and a lot more features. But of course, the Freedom is meant to be addressed towards more Tier 2, Tier 3 cities who want a rugged motorcycle that's cheap to run. And I think it hits the brief pretty well on that. Okay, so Azaman, any final thoughts?
Okay, so the main thing that we're going to talk about is the CNG infrastructure right now, because that's the main talking point when it comes to this motorcycle. Now, currently, it's only being sold in Maharashtra and Gujarat. And what we'd like to say is that currently in Maharashtra, the infrastructure is not as good as it is in Gujarat. So you're going to have to wait for a bit in lines before getting your CNG refilled. Now, that being said, Bajaj does tell us that they are working with many of these providers to make CNG more easily available.
Of course, the reason to buy a CNG bike is the running cost. Now, based on the efficiency that we got about rupees 1 per kilometer of running cost, which is half of that of an equivalent petrol motorcycle, which is easily rupees 2 per kilometer. But of course, if you want to really save money and really save running costs, the way to do it is get an EV. But that said, EVs are more expensive to buy, a lot more expensive, and over 5-6 years the battery is to degrade, and that's not the case with the CNG bike. However, we've been told that every 2 years the CNG system has to get recertified, and Bajaj will do it for you. Although any parts that require to be changed, that cost has to be borne by the rider.
Yeah, so now while EVs might be the cheaper option to run, and currently, as I said, the CNG infrastructure in Maharashtra is not up to the mark. But after waiting in line, filling your CNG is an instant process compared to an EV which you have to charge for an hour or a few hours at minimum.
Yeah, so in summation, the Freedom is actually a very good bike. It's rugged, it rides really well, it's comfortable, it's smooth, it's tractable. It's a little tall seat height wise, but it's something you can get used to. Again, a little heavy, but again, you can get used to that. Overall, features wise, it's decently featured. And in terms of braking, well, that could be a little better. But in the end, it looks like nothing else on our road right now. So that was our overview of the Bajaj Freedom 125. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. And if you have any more questions about the CNG bike, we can answer them in the comments for you right there. And as always, thank you so much for watching.